Hey everybody, this is Joe Pace with Icewater Yoga, and today we're making hard yoga poses easy. The focus for today is wheel pose. And if you don't know what wheel pose is, essentially it's a back bend where you have your arms overhead, your hands are planted against the floor, your feet are planted against the floor, and your pelvis is lifted towards the ceiling. So your body almost makes this arching shape, hands here, facing the ceiling with your face, and then looping over to your feet over here. Okay, so we want to obviously build up to this pose. This isn't something you're doing on day one. So what we want to do is give you the ability to build all of the components in your body you need for the pose so that you can start understanding it a little bit better. So using 5 steps to do it, we'll start with step 1, Locust Pose. And the goal for Locust is to build back strength, period. So this is a very strong contraction back bend. Zip the legs together. You can start with Cobra Pose. So the hands come underneath the elbows. You lift through the chest. You're strongly contracting your back. You're barely putting any weight, if any, into your hands. From here to take full Locust Pose, your hands hover from the floor, arms by your sides. Lift the legs as well. Lift your body as high as you can from the floor, contracting in the back, resisting gravity. This is giving you the back strength you need to support full wheel pose. Get comfortable doing Locust. I strongly recommend, if you're doing flow yoga classes or vinyasa yoga classes, replacing every upward facing dog with a Locust, because a Locust is giving you more back strength, less mobility, but far more strength so you can be more sturdy in back bends. Okay, so that's step 1. We want to build sturdiness in the back bend, but we also want to build openness in the front body so that we can open up into the full pose. To do that, we're going to use Camel Pose. So that's step 2. Knees will be underneath the hips. Hands will come to the low back. Draw your elbows towards one another. So your fingers are touching the upper part of your butt. Your elbows, again, are zipping towards one another. You'll already start to feel your upper chest spreading. From here, keep your chin in towards your chest, but lift your center of your chest towards your chin. You'll find your upper body arching, and now you find a little bit of a back bend, and this is a traction back bend. We're using the traction we're creating on the front of the body to support the back bend and hold it up in space. This is a huge component of wheel pose. We want to feel very open in the front body, lifting through the chest, maybe drop the head. To come out, bring the chin back in toward the chest, lift the chest towards the ceiling, sit back to your heels, take a moment. Okay, so now we built range of motion in the front body and range of motion in the back body and strength with Locust Pose. But a missing piece of wheel pose, and something that often doesn't get realized, is the importance of the hip flexor and the openness of the hip flexor. So we also need to address that. We'll do that with low lunge, and we'll sprinkle a little bit of extra spicy sauce on this to make it even more beneficial for wheel. All right, so low lunge, my front knee is right over my front ankle. I keep my hips in line with one another. I shift my hips forward, but I don't let them pitch downward. So I'm keeping my hips lifted, I shift them forward, I lift my arms overhead. So you'll already feel a big hip flexor stretch here. Lift high through the fingers, maybe take it into a back bend. Hands can be at the low back, just like camel. Lift through the chest. Chin can be in towards the chest, so you're feeling the combined effects of camel and the leverage we have in the front of the hip from low lunge. So this is a pretty massive pose for wheel. Maybe lift the arms up and back. That's a pretty big movement. Hands come down. Make sure you're doing both sides. Get really comfortable in all 3 of these steps. Then we move to bridge pose. So this is step 4. Lay on your back. Heels are underneath the knees. You're pressing your triceps into the mat. Your heels stay right under your knees stay right over your heels. From there, pressing to your triceps, lift up through your hips. From here, options. You can wiggle your shoulders down towards your heels, lift your hips a little higher. Here, you're bringing minimal contraction in the butt. Keep the butt firm, but not super intensely engaged. But lifting through the hips, breathe here, okay? So now if you feel comfortable in this position, we can move to step 5, bringing the hands overhead. So if you feel like this is too much pressure on the neck or too much pressure on the low back, bring the triceps back to the floor to support the pose. Otherwise, fingertips point towards you, elbows right over wrists. If you don't have the wrist mobility yet, work your wrist mobility. Otherwise, lift your hips up towards the ceiling, bring the top of your head to the floor. There's barely any weight in my head, it's all in my arms and my feet. From here, I press through the elbows, I lift my hips towards the ceiling, maybe I walk my feet in. Don't feel like you have to drop your head back. You can keep your chin in towards your chest, and it's still the full pose. You can always add dropping the head. To come out, lower the top of the head to the floor. Tuck your chin in towards your chest with hands firmly pressed against the floor. And then come back down through bridge pose. Rolling up to seated. That is full wheel pose. 5 steps towards it. And there's no real recipe for this. Make sure you're comfortable every step of the way before you move into the full pose. By watching this video, you have a lot more of an understanding of the process to get there and also things to look out for before you make your way into the pose. I invite any questions or comments in the comments section. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for it, and I look forward to working with you again in the future.